We've all heard the big promise, right? That AI is going to completely change data science, just instantly turning messy data into these brilliant insights. But, if you've ever actually tried to use an AI assistant for a really tough analysis, the reality is, well, it's often a total letdown. They give it a shot, but they usually get it wrong. Today, we're going to look at a brand new approach that might finally fix this whole mess.
So what's the deal? Why is this so incredibly hard for them? I mean, these are supposed to be super powerful language models that can write code like it's nothing. But funnily enough, that's kind of where the problem starts.
See, there is a world of difference between code that's executable, it runs without crashing, and code that is actually correct. Most AI agents today, they just stop as soon as the code runs. They have absolutely no way to go back and double-check if the logic was right or if the answer it spit out even makes any sense. It's kind of like a student who just scribbles down answers on a math test and turns it in without checking any of their work.
Okay, let's really get into this, because the way these AI analysts are failing, it isn't just about writing a bit of bad code. It really points to a much, much deeper problem with how they're even designed to look at the world in the first place.
The researchers behind this new paper, they just put it perfectly. Current AIs are fantastic if you hand them one single, perfectly clean spreadsheet. But come on, the real world is never that easy. The most valuable info is usually buried in a whole mix of different, messy, complicated files.
And this right here brings us to the heart of the challenge, what the paper calls heterogeneous data. Or let's be real, what we can just call the messy data problem.
Just think about any real business question you've ever had. The answer is almost never sitting in one tidy little file. Nope, it's usually scattered all over the place across a dozen different sources and a dozen different formats. And for most AI agents out there, that's just pure chaos.
For instance, a single task might need you to link up customer sales data from a CSV file with their account info that's stored in a totally different format, like a JSON file. Each of those has its own structure, its own set of rules.
And believe me, it doesn't stop there. You might also have to pull some context from a bunch of plain text files, or maybe navigate the jungle of multiple tabs in a massive Excel workbook. For most AIs, this is like trying to read 4 different languages at the same time. They just can't bring it all together.
But what if? What if an AI could actually learn how to navigate this mess, to actually make sense of all that chaos? Well, that is the huge idea behind a new data science agent called DS-Star.
And this isn't just some theory either. This is a whole new framework that's been developed by researchers at Google Cloud and KIST, the Korea Advanced Institute of Science and Technology. And they've given it a totally different way of thinking.
Instead of just blindly hammering out code and, hoping for the best, DS-Star is built to act more like a human data scientist, a really cautious one. It stops, it thinks, it analyzes, and most importantly, it checks its own work before it even thinks about moving on.
So how does it pull this off? Well, this whole cautious approach is built around a super simple but incredibly powerful loop. Plan, verify, and repeat.
So here's the breakdown. First, and this is the absolute key, it doesn't even touch the problem until it analyzes all of those messy data files to figure out what it's dealing with. Only then does it come up with a simple, high-level plan. It writes the code for that first step, and then, and this is the magic part, it stops. It actually verifies if that plan is still on the right track, and only if the plan passes that check does it refine it and move on to the next step. So how does it actually verify its own work? Well, DS-Star has a secret weapon. It's called an LLM-based judge. Just think of it like a separate AI partner whose entire job is to be a super skeptical supervisor. It looks at the plan, it looks at the code, and it asks, hey, is this actually going to solve the problem, or are we just about to run down a dead end? And that little step prevents the AI from wasting a ton of time on a bad strategy.
Okay, this all sounds amazing in theory, right? An AI that plans and acts and then gets a second opinion from its little AI judge buddy? But does this whole cautious step-by-step process actually get you better answers? To find out, the researchers put it through an absolute gauntlet of really difficult data science benchmarks. And the results are, well, just look at this chart. It shows the performance across a bunch of different tests. The other AIs are in blue and red. DS-Star, that's the big yellow line on the outside. This isn't just a little bit better. It is a massive leap forward, especially when you look at the really hard problems.
Let's put a hard number to it. On a benchmark called DAB step, which is specifically designed to be like these complex real-world data challenges, DS star hit an accuracy of 45.2% on the hardest tasks. Now, that might not sound like a perfect score, but trust me, in the world of AI data science, that is a huge, huge breakthrough.
Now, what's really wild is when you put it side by side with the others. The next best competitor, it tops out at 41%. And those older, but still pretty common agent frameworks like React, they're barely breaking 10%. So DS star isn't just winning here, it's playing a completely different game.
And this right here shows you exactly why. In one test, an older agent was told to filter for NextPay transactions. It just went ahead and assumed a column named NextPay existed, wrote the code, and it failed. DS star, on the other hand, did its homework. It looked at the files first, realized the correct column was actually named card_scheme, and wrote code that worked perfectly. It's really the difference between just guessing and actually knowing.
So what does all of this mean for the future of data science and AI? Well, it feels like we're finally moving away from unreliable toys and towards dependable tools.
So let's just boil it all down. Why does this really matter to you? First, it gives us a real path to reliably automate all this work on the messy, real-world data that all of us actually have. Second, it gives us an AI that checks its own reasoning before it acts, which is a huge step for building trust. All this moves us way closer to that dream of fully automated data science. And at the end of the day, for anyone who relies on data, this just means better, faster, and way more trustworthy decisions.
You know, this whole idea of self-verification, it's incredibly powerful. It's what separates a real expert from a novice. So it leaves us with this really fascinating question. As AI gets better at not just doing the work, but checking its own work, what other really complex, human-led jobs are next on the list for full automation?